And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Factors.ai webinar today. Uh, Factors.ai is a B2B account intelligence, ad optimization, and attribution product. We work with B2B companies to identify the right accounts which matter to them, and most importantly, run kind of all-bound campaigns to these accounts, and also attribute which campaigns are working, not working, so that you can iteratively optimize your campaigns. That's what we do. We work with 400 plus B2B companies. And today we are joined by Anthony Perry of Fletch, and to discuss a very, very important topic. This is something which is important for early stage startups which are doing, let's say, 200K in revenue, to $5 million companies, Series A, SaaS startups, to even $100 million plus unicorns. How do you position as you move up market? And this is something, it's not just marketers who struggle with it, even founders and CROs and investors really struggle with, like, how to help companies move up market. And given the gravity of this topic and how important it is, we have one of the leading experts in this field, Anthony, join us today. And over the next 30 minutes, he will take you through a specially crafted presentation on to discuss, like, what are the kind of common misconceptions which people have when they're moving up market, and also how to avoid it and build a real pitch as you go to up market. And without wasting more time, Anthony, welcome to the Factors Studio, and very, very happy and much obliged to have you with us to share your insights. The stage is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen, so just give me a second while I grab that. All right. You should be able to see my Figma doc. Maybe we have to bring it up onto the stage, I believe.
Yeah, just a moment. Yes, add to the stage, and it's there.
Awesome. So I'll be talking for about 20 minutes or so. We'll see. We'll see if the clock keeps me honest. But yeah, so a little bit about me. I'm the co-founder at Fletch. We specifically help B2B technology companies from startups all the way through large enterprises, specifically with positioning, and then how that positioning strategy gets translated, documented on your homepage. So our team is very small. It's just me, my co-founder, and our principal copywriter. The three of us together, we've worked with about 400 companies at this point. And that's, there's no big team that we're handing that off to. That's just
we are a 50-member team. We proudly say we work with 400 customers. You have worked with 400 customers, so three.
Okay. Yes, and that's us running all these workshops together. So it's thousands and thousands of hours in the trenches trying to help these companies figure out the ways to position. So from very small companies right through very large ones, you'll probably recognize some of these logos. In lots
quite
of
a few customers, very good friends as well. So that's a pretty awesome list.
For sure. And so really, first thing, we help startups with their positioning. And when we define positioning, it's really answering three questions. Who is your product for? What does it replace? And what makes it different in order to get that into the minds of your customers, kind of like that movie Inception. And when we say we help companies with positioning, what we're really talking about is the primary positioning. So when you think about certain companies, there's something that comes to mind. Even if they're used in lots of different ways, there's usually one primary position that comes to mind. Figma, what's it for? It's for designing. Cursor, what's it for? It's for developing. Stripe, what's it for? It's for payments. Salesforce, what's it for? It's for CRM. All of these things are the primary positioning, and yet we know that there are many, many sub-positionings for each of these different companies. You could look at secondary positionings for a company like Figma. It's also used for product management. It's also used for engineers. It's also used for whiteboarding, brainstorming sessions, for building presentations. I'm sharing it right now, right? I'm not a designer, and I'm sharing it right now. So what we're talking about is helping people figure out the primary positioning, and that is what we think should get reflected on the homepage. And the reason that we do homepages alongside of the positioning strategy is that oftentimes when people work on positioning, they might make the hard decisions in the room together, but then it never quite makes it out to customer-facing assets. So it will be all figured out in this nice strategy doc, but unless you could get it to a public asset like a homepage, sometimes it just never becomes real. So we think it's better to do this on a homepage, get everyone aligned, get the stakeholders on the same page, also get your customers, investors, everyone to understand who you're for, what you do, the answers to all those questions. So today, We're really talking about how does your positioning evolve as you move up market. And I know your co-founder was, I think, a little under the weather. So Sri, thanks so much for jumping in at the last minute.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is basically the topic we're going to be going through. So when we think about positioning for these different segments, if you ask ChatGPT or most people, how should we position for the enterprise? What would that have to look like? And how should we position for SMB? You're going to get these sort of answers. People will say, well, if you do SMB, you have to highlight features and functionality. You want to be really specific. You want to emphasize speed, simplicity, all that stuff. And if we do it for the enterprise, it's completely different. We want to lead with business impact, ROI. We want to go broad. We want to stay wide. We want to emphasize scale, security. And these are sort of pitched as very far ends of a really big spectrum with no real overlap. And like, to give you some examples, right? Enterprise positioning. Sorry, you're saying something?
And just trust me, this is something which is told to almost every single startup founder by kind of like senior founders or companies which have run multiple things, by senior product marketers, by even investors, to say like, okay, this is how you need to think and you're thinking this wrong. Maybe you're scrappy now, but later you have to be like this. So this is something which we hear day in and day out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and I'll keep chugging through. We could dialogue more at the end. So really, when we think of enterprise-esque positioning, we think of things like this, right? We think of like people like Cleary. Run revenue, drive predictable growth, powered by AI, discover why sales teams run revenue like champions, all this sort of like revenue orchestration platform. It feels very like big and, you know, serious, and it's black, and it's, you know, like big text, bold. It's like, this is very enterprisey, right? Or like the ultimate example would be someone like Palantir, right? Yeah. Our software powers real-time AI-driven decisions in critical government, commercial enterprise in the West, from the factory floors to the front. Like, this is super enterprisey language. This does not sound like a small company or anything like that. So the question is, if you are a company that has traditionally played in the SMB or even lower mid-market, and you want to add enterprise, is the goal to emulate this type of messaging of people like Palantir and Cleary along these same lines, right? Like, do we think this is kind of the path if you're going to sell it to the enterprise? And what we're talking about, again, we're not talking about pivoting. It's one question to say, we tried going after the consumer market, it didn't work. Now we're going to go after the enterprise, like someone like Google Glass did. They had a failed run in consumer. They had an okay run in the enterprise. Obviously, the brand aesthetic, if you say we're no longer trying to get every person to wear these glasses, and we're trying to get just factory workers to wear them, it's a very different positioning. So we're not talking about pivoting. We're talking about people who are adding, right? Someone like Notion starting in the SMB, then adding mid-market clients, adding enterprise clients. So when we are doing this addition, what should happen to our positioning? Should we emulate it? And my short answer is no. You should not answer. You should not emulate these Palantir-esque language if you are adding these things on. And the longer answer is also no. And I'll tell why. First and foremost, I want to talk about some misconceptions about these positioning shifts as you layer on bigger companies into the mix. So first misconception, you should position for the decision maker on your homepage if you are moving up market. And this, I've been in calls with tons of founders, and it will always happen like this. They will say, you know, we got to the ending of this big deal cycle with one of the big companies. The CFO didn't believe that there was revenue potential or didn't think it was going to drive the ROI, and they killed the deal. We need to go through and update all of our homepage messaging, all of our up funnel stuff to say that we drive revenue. And this is like a very common belief, but in reality, this is not actually how these companies shop for software. So there's a company called Winter that ran a big qualitative study of CTOs, CFOs, CMOs in B2B SaaS companies that were doing at least $50 million a year. And what they found is that only 13% of executives would be the person leading the software buying cycle from beginning to end, to actually go out, look at, evaluate homepages, read the content, make the short list, get in front, you know, do demos in different, you know, companies, and basically take you to beginning to end. Only 13% of that was the case. In the other 87% of the time, this process was delegated. Because if you're a big executive at a large company that's doing at least $50 million a year, you actually don't have time to take a bunch of meetings with AEs at multiple companies, read websites, vet them to see they meet all the feature criteria. And so what ends up happening is that someone far lower in the org will get delegated this task. And so that person is usually director or manager level. And directors and managers of companies, if you guys are in big companies yourself, if you're watching this, you think about your managers, they actually don't, stay up at night thinking about the revenue of the company at large. They're much more thinking about their world. They're thinking about much levels lower than you are as the senior executive. And they are the person who is evaluating the website. So someone way higher up says, we think we need a new CRM. We think it's going to drive these business outcomes. Go figure out which is the right CRM for us. And so that champion goes and starts reading websites, even in a big enterprise, goes and starts reading websites to understand the differences between them, almost at a very functional level, not at an ROI business case level, but truly, what are the differences between Salesforce, HubSpot, Close, Addio, cooler, upstarts that are in this space. Right. And so what we find is that based on the way that people are buying from the data, you actually should primarily position for the champion of your ICP on the homepage. And so that usually, if you think about finding them, it's someone who is sort of in the middle of having some level of buying power and some level of pain awareness. If we go up to the high level people, they have a ton of decision-making authority, a ton of buying power, but they don't necessarily have the pain awareness of what actually problems on the factory floor, so to say, or you're trying to solve. But if you go very low to an individual contributor, they'll have a ton of awareness of the pain, but they'll have no real decision-making authority. So you're trying to find someone who has enough clout to be able to pull in the executives to make this deal happen, but also is aware of the pains, understands the differences. And it's like what we found from the data, it's usually a director or manager level. So when you write the page for them, right, they actually will read the page and try to understand the things that your product does and doesn't do, versus the decision maker will likely read not much or any of it. They will have delegated it away. We think of it sort of like building trust on a staircase. You first win people over by showing the functional features and capabilities of the product, which lead to more functional benefits. That's going to convince the champion who's low enough down to understand those functional problems they need to solve to basically get a chance to pitch the executive. And the executive will come into the buying process after you first won over the champion. And so we always say, you're going to have to make all these arguments. You're going to have to make the ROI pitch. You're going to have to talk about how you can drive efficiency or revenue with some business outcome. That has to happen, but it's going to happen after you first have won over the champion and the more functional aspects of the product. There's a guy named Nate Nasrallah. He's probably like the foremost person pioneering this concept, where you actually want to build business cases co-created with the champion that are highly specific for the enterprise that you're selling into. So you don't want to lead with generic business cases of like, use us and your revenue will go up. You actually want to build highly specific business cases alongside, co-created with the champion around KPIs and things that they really, really care about in their particular enterprise. So it's very hard to do marketing, to do public primary product positioning around these highly individualized enterprise needs. So that is left better for the sales process, not necessarily from a marketing positioning perspective. Second misconception, large companies care about primarily business outcomes, not features and functionality. So that's what you should put on your homepage. And what we have found is that when you lead mostly with these business outcomes, it will actually remove your differentiation. And sort of along those same lines of what I was just saying, because the business outcomes that individual enterprises care about are so highly individualized, if you want to try to find a generalized business outcome, you're going to sort of end up in like one of three buckets. We reduce risk, we save money, or we bring in more revenue for you. And so when you say those kinds of things, you end up actually looking the same as all the other people around you, even if you are very different. And the sales tech space is hugely, guilty of this. that when you have turn product into revenue, turn your website into revenue, one platform for revenue workflows, connect marketing pipeline to revenue, optimize campaigns to revenue, turn data into revenue, all of these different things, when in reality, each one of these does something very different, right? Gong records, transcribes, analyzes sales calls. Mutiny personalizes websites for different visitors. Pocus, surfaces sales opportunities from product usage data, signals, and things like that. That's actually the thing that will matter more to that champion who's reading it. We also use a term that we call like multi-order benefits, where basically if you think about what's the immediate benefit of using a product, that's usually the most differentiated outcome that you could talk about. So if I'm using Asana, the first order benefit is like your team's going to be able to complete projects faster. If I'm going to use HubSpot, your sales team will get this unified view of all your prospect interactions. If you're using Stripe, the business can process payments way more efficiently. All these types of things. These are first order differentiated benefits. But if I start cascading them and say, well, if I can do that, well, then that would mean I could launch more features to market, which means I could increase customer satisfaction, which means they'll spread more word of mouth, which means I'll get more customers, which means I'll get more revenue. That when we walk all these things out, by the time we've done that, we're 5 or 6 orders away from the immediate benefits a product delivers. And all of a sudden, we're all saying the same thing. And every website looks the same, and you've removed all your differentiation. And we see this too. A shocking thing from the same Winter study that I mentioned before is that when asked these executives, what was the most valuable part of the entire buying process? They all say the demo, the traditional sales demo, where they hear what they have to say, be pitched, and see the product. So even though we think, oh, big time executives don't care about products, these executives in companies doing at least $50 million a year, they were like, the biggest value was when I got to sit down with a salesperson, see the product, and understand how it was going to solve the challenges of our business. And we find that time and time again, because at the end of the day, we are buying software to help workers do work. And so it's good to know what workflows will the software actually support, not just will the number on the chart go up or down.
Go up.
It makes it believable to see it. And we even saw this, there's a guy named Sahil Patel. He runs a very, very large conversion rate optimization software company. He's run a bunch of agencies in the past, and they did a really big test with HubSpot, where they had a version of the homepage that showed the product, and they had a version of the homepage that didn't. And the one that showed the product was like a pretty lame screenshot. It was like not even a very like sexy part of HubSpot. It was pretty like low fidelity, just screenshot. They ran this A/B test, and the conversion rate was 27% higher when they did the ones of the product without the product, right? So people want to see the product. Even enterprises who buy you want to know what are the features and functionality of this product before they buy it. Third misconception, if you cater to SMBs or focus on features and functionality, large companies will not take you seriously. And we have just found that this is just not the case. And we can look at a bunch of really big company examples that started with SMB and then layered on mid-market, layered on enterprise to see that this is just not the case. A great one, Notion. When we look at Notion's page, we see write, plan, collaborate with a little help from AI. We see these kind of funny little drawings, giant product, clearly listed use cases that are very functional in nature, wikis, docs, projects, AI, calendar, websites. Build docs together, capture ideas, get feedback from teammates, ask AI. Nothing about business outcomes, nothing about ROI, nothing about any of that type of more enterprisey stuff. All very functional, product-centric, big, giant, full-screen pictures of the product. And yet, when we look here, used by over 50% of Fortune 500 companies. Another example, Canva, right? What will you design today? Do you want to make a little nice whiteboard, a social post, a video, a print, templates for anything? Customize an office template, design something more personal, like an invite. This is like the most SMB-focused language, incredibly low level. No businesses are even being mentioned. It's like a almost purely consumer. And yet, when we scroll over, trusted by 95% of the Fortune 500. So
this is in the second fold, the first fold, and then the second fold.
Yes. This is and this I can't even remember if this was in the fold at all. This might have been on the other enterprise page. I'd have to go back and check.
Okay.
But essentially, what we're seeing is these things are not mutually exclusive, right? Shopify, be the next one to watch. Dream big, build fast, grow far. Shopify. We have what clearly is a mom in her house, like working late with her baby, with their Shopify store. There's probably nothing more SMB than that, right? And yet we see over 10% of all US e-commerce is processed through Shopify. Massive companies are using Shopify for enterprise, doing huge, huge numbers. They are not mutually exclusive. Salesforce, right? Because maybe we're just highlighting like very functional companies. Salesforce, fun fact, started in SMB. They were not traditionally enterprise. Now they obviously are very enterprise. But even Salesforce today in 2025 is saying, start simply with the starter suite, the all-in-one CRM for small business. They have the phrase small business in the first sentence of their, $300 billion company's homepage. And we know that they are used by 90% of the Fortune 500 and have deep, deep penetration in the enterprise. What about more technical products? Let's look at Datadog, super enterprise focused, modern monitoring and security. See inside any stack, any app, at any scale, anywhere. Huge picture of the product. When you scroll down, they have some of the jankiest product screenshots I've ever seen. It's literally a screen recording that we could have done in QuickTime. You can see the little mouse moving, like clicking. It's like the sexiest thing imaginable. Nothing about business outcomes, nothing about ROI, pure product imagery on the homepage right away. And what do we know about them? They're a $29 billion company, and they're trusted by companies like Shell, Samsung, Deloitte, Siemens, some of the biggest, most legacy enterprises in the world. Loom, another one, right? The easiest screen recorder you'll ever use. Super functional. Sounds like very SMB. They have a ton of product stuff right away. Lightning fast screen recording. And yet Loom, thousands of leading enterprises trust Loom. So this is clearly the case that you don't actually have to do that shift where you remove all the features and functionality, everything becomes about business outcomes, you ignore your SMB audience, all that type of stuff. You don't actually have to do that when you layer on Upmarket. So what should you change though? Some very quick wins. Add a dedicated enterprise page. We see this time and time again, companies that will have an enterprise page that will be super useful and contain a bunch of things that will matter to them. Share the enterprise credibility with logos. As we've seen with a lot of these companies, they are communicating that even though they started in SMB and have a deep penetration SMB, they also are extremely well trusted by large companies. So when you get these big companies to buy into you, share their logos. See if they'll let you do it. Maybe ask for forgiveness, not permission. Do it anyways. I'm just kidding. I want to get legal trouble. But also show that you can handle the enterprise requirements. Enterprise has a bunch of lists of things that they're looking for. They want it to be SSO, all right? They want it to be SOC 2 compliant. So you need to show them right away that you can actually handle all the things that they're going to need. Share very ROI-centric case studies. The case studies you use to communicate can be very helpful by picking large brands in your case studies that you share on the homepage, talking about very specific ROI numbers. That could be very helpful. And then also just start dropping hints that you do support larger companies as well. How I pointed out that they say all-in-one smart CRM for small business, Salesforce, then scale endlessly, right? So they're trying to hint that this can be used across the whole journey. Shopify, for everyone, from entrepreneurs all the way to the enterprise. So dropping these hints. And the thing to avoid is to not lose your soul. My favorite example is probably from DocuSign. DocuSign, 2016, they called themselves an e-signature brand. It was very SMB friendly. In 2020, they started to move up market. Now they said we're a world's first agreement cloud. And then in 2024, they said introducing intelligent agreement management. And the whole internet made fun of them. They were relentlessly mocked for just making up what they felt like was a very enterprisey category. And people were like, they're literally just coming up with stupid phrases to charge more money to try to get enterprises to buy them. And then it was such a giant failure, cost them millions and millions of dollars, that in 2025, they reverted back to a nice, much more realistic, friendly message, everything you need to agree, sign, send, and manage all your agreements for free. And so they also are publicly traded, deep, deep penetration in the enterprise. And so they turn it around. So do not lose your soul. So that is my presentation. And I think it was 20 minutes, but I wasn't.
You made it on time. You totally made it on time. So
Great.
there is no the same. Actually, as I was going through, and I had also done a little bit of homework prior to this, I had created a mind map of your previous conversations and this thing. A lot of what you said related with both our own product journey as well. Primarily, we serve companies, B2B companies, companies that start spending on LinkedIn ads because, like, at least one is when they start spending on LinkedIn ads, they get a certain amount of product market fit, they get multiple signals, and they want to actually target more customers with top of the funnel ads and also with bottom of the funnel messaging and this thing to get them back and this thing. And in this, what we saw is like companies that spend on LinkedIn ads is a wide variety. There is a SMB team within LinkedIn ads, which serve companies that spend, let's say, 100K to 300K in LinkedIn ads over the whole year. And there is an enterprise solutions group, which actually serves almost like 6,000 companies globally, which spend more than $1 million on LinkedIn ads.
Yeah.
And as we were scaling with companies which spend on LinkedIn ads to optimize for their LinkedIn ads optimization, we moved a lot from small scale SMB mid market companies which are spending low on LinkedIn ads to companies which are spending millions on LinkedIn ads, which was there. And that's when we also struggled with the whole kind of like, how do we position? What are the things which we need to say for each company? Should we talk about our specific features and functionality, or should we talk about something like, oh, we scale your revenue with LinkedIn ads? So kind of a very broad statement. And it just hit me, it's like the enterprises and the SMBs or the thing care about the same thing. I'm running LinkedIn ads. I have to get the maximum bang for the buck. What's the best way to drive more ROI? If you can deliver better ROI with better ad scheduling, ad optimization, smart reach, and audience, great. And this is something which would apply for both sides and also how you actually position exactly to the decision maker and this thing. So it resonated so much for us and other this thing. So thanks a lot for the presentation, and it basically reflected back last 6 months of our own lives back to us. So that's one point which I wanted to just share the same. One thing which I also wanted to understand is like you mentioned very clearly in some of the misconceptions which people do. You don't choose the right person to actually position. Sometimes you either go too up or too low, which is there. Um, have you seen examples of some companies which have done this perfectly in terms of choosing the right decision maker and who would be the decision maker and how they had shown it in that? And have you also seen examples of like where companies sometimes go wrong also in this? Any kind of like live examples in that case which you want to talk about or you can share from your own experience?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so we would say, what we that's like a big part of what we try to help companies do is figure out who is the right person and how can we put things in terms that they can understand and sort of make the pitch to them. There's a guy, there's a podcast actually. It's more for like service providers and consultants and stuff. It's called Two Bobs, and it's these two guys who talk about this a lot. It's really good for anyone who's kind of in that space, but also interesting for people in software companies as well. But they talk about at one point using this metaphor of like golfing, where you're hitting the golf ball, you're trying to get it into the hole, and that hole is like the highly specific exact person that you would want to land on the site, to care about it, who would buy from you, all that stuff. But you're okay if it lands somewhere on the green, and the green represents the surrounding decision makers and with their varying needs. And what will end up happening, what we always see happening is, like let's take our own business, for example. We are extremely specific in who we position for. We say it's for B2B SaaS, venture-backed startups. It's usually the head of marketing who's recently started, wants to get the whole team aligned, maybe ahead of a big raise or right after a raise before they're going to spend a bunch of money in their go-to-market. We have this like hyper-specific person that we're writing the page for. And when we talk about the pain points that they have and the ways we solve it, we're putting it in language specifically for that one person. And yet we get people all across the map who are not that person landing on the site and still booking calls with us and saying, I know I'm not your exact ICP, but I get what you do because of the clarity of the page. And it makes me want to work with you because we actually need the thing that you have. And so for a very long time, this was the story of Figma, where they were highly specific around these product designers, but people like product managers could see themselves in it. They'd be like, well, I could use that as well. Or this feature and functionality would matter for me. Or developers would want to use it for different things. And so there's often examples like that where you could come in and they're just happy to land on the green. And like in terms of examples, we've got this library on our website, and I don't want to seem like I'm just plugging our business or something, but we do have this big library.
Please do.
Yeah, it's Fletch PMM is the company name, and we have this before and after library. And most companies, I would say, who came in struggling, when we show the before, it will likely be that they have positioned too high. We see the too high way more than we see the too low.
Too low, okay.
Yeah, it's very rare that anyone will do too low. And that's because the general marketing advice that everyone gets is nobody cares about the product, lead with the outcome, sell the business case. And so everyone kind of just takes that loose advice and makes their website, increase your revenue with whatever. And so we usually see it's too high. And then we try to, usually if you look at the after, it will be trying to bring it back down to a more meaningful, director or manager who's actually going to be more likely to be the champion. And then one other thing to your first point, right, about your guys' website, the thing that is totally true is that all these people want to get better, ROAS, like return on ad spend for their LinkedIn ads. But the problem is people get, let's say, inundated with, cold emails, cold DMs. Hey, you want me to get you better ROAS? And like there's a big believability gap. And so the features and the functionality, that's actually what will get people to believe that you can drive that outcome. And we've often said the homepage, the homepage is the how page. Because if you put out into the world, like factors marketing, higher up the funnel before they get to the homepage, if it's all related to like, hey, you're hemorrhaging money on your ad spend, there's no way to attribute which people are seeing it, and so you're wasting money and wrong. But if you land that message, they're going to say, wow, I wonder, how do you solve that? I want to see if this is real. They land on your homepage, and that's where you pitch them. This is how it works, how we solve the problem that got you here.
Nice. Oh, this is fantastic advice. And thanks for taking our own examples and also this thing, because it's like, in a sense, you just broke it down to like create the interest with the ad in terms of like, give that kind of like, we solve for this. This is something which is a crucial pain. Then people click on it, like, how the hell these guys are doing it. Then they come and say, oh, this is how they're doing. Then they'll be interested in either signing up for a demo or even reading more, or even sending it to someone who's in charge within their team to actually talk about it. So that's where landing across in the green as well also makes sense. So in a sense,
Yeah, for sure. Sorry to cut you off, right? But it's sort of interesting. It's like in your demand gen, you actually kind of do want to talk mostly about these business outcomes. Like you want to basically make the pitch that the business needs to shift its priorities to focus on the thing that ideally your product does, right? And so like for us, when we do demand gen, we're constantly trying to say, hey, your positioning is actually the big issue here. It's not the fact that your sales team isn't efficient, or you need to do sales training, or you need to invest more in this channel. We try to shift the business priorities to say, man, we actually need to focus on positioning. And so the positioning, like the business outcome stuff, happens up in the funnel, and then it filters in, becomes much more functional and like specific around like homepage stuff. And then it goes back up and becomes business outcome again once you start talking to executives. So it's like a sort of like a ping-ponging thing. You have to talk about it here, and then you talk about it a lot less when you explain it, and then you come over here, you talk about it again to try to prove it, so that like the CFO or whoever that final decision maker is will actually sign the check that lets you guys, get embedded in the company.
This is more of a side question, which is more like some companies get positioning right. They exactly talk about the problems which they care about and this thing, and still sometimes fail because the product hasn't caught up really well, or the product market fit is not good, or the product is not. On the other hand, we have also seen like companies don't nail their positioning correctly, but still, because the product is so awesome or so well designed, people just in either a PLG form, it grows very well. Have you seen this kind of a dichotomy playing out in this thing? This is more like a type 1, type 2 errors which happen, so like that.
Yeah, for sure. And so what I should always clarify, and I always forget to clarify this, all the stuff that I talk about with positioning is primarily when the company needs to grow through traditional sales and marketing channels. And so companies that have incredibly viral spread, things like OpenAI, Cursor, any of these like incredibly viral products that kind of spread themselves, they actually don't necessarily have to do the same type of product positioning that we would be talking about in a traditional marketing and sales sense. It's like the question of, if I'm going to launch a marketing campaign and I need to know, like, who do I want to put this message in front of? Let's just say it's LinkedIn ads. I have to choose a list of people to run the ad, right? Like, that's the whole ABM concept. Yeah. So when I need to say, okay, well, I actually can't spend money to reach everyone through marketing. You can't run a Super Bowl ad if you're a smaller company. You're going to have to make some prioritization decisions. But if you have a product that is incredibly viral, maybe it's community led, like that's what we saw in the early days of like Airtable, where like individual people started building things in Airtable, sharing them on YouTube, and basically evangelizing all these different use cases and ways that it could be used. Like all that type of stuff is not traditional sales and marketing. It's a completely different growth paradigm. And so in those cases, you don't actually have to nail the product positioning as much. And so we worked with Notion not too long ago. They started much more community led, but they were layering on sales motions to penetrate specific parts of larger companies. And so they actually, all of a sudden, they had lived for so long in the we can do anything bucket that when they went to write these specific pages for specific use cases, specific audiences, all of a sudden it was like a new muscle that they had to exercise that they hadn't really been exercising as much before. How are we going to actually position the product for this specific group? Who do we want to compare ourselves against? What's our differentiation? All those questions come into play that wouldn't necessarily have mattered. Like if you're that Lovable company, you know, you open Lovable and it's like, type in a sentence and we'll build the app right now. Like that's so crazy viral. It doesn't really matter. You don't need marketing. I don't think they've done like any marketing. Even OpenAI, I think, just posted the other day. They're like, we just ran our first marketing campaign, and they have 400 million users and are doing, you know, who knows how many billions in revenue. So it's just different paradigms.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty interesting in a sense. It's like eventually the product trends, but in a sense, as long as you have a very solid positioning, and even when you are in a very saturated market, you can stand out and you can grow. And the growth and acceleration is what differentiates the kind of the winners from the other competitors. So that in a sense is basically the larger point. And that's where the positioning comes through as well. And one more thing, I was looking through some of your previous previous posts and other things. Positioning is pretty evident, like it's one of the most important parts. It's like, and you mentioned that it's more important than sales training, or it can be even from so many other issues which you care about, like if you position well and other things. Is there a positioning sticks to the chief or the product marketer? Product marketers primarily involved with actually building the positioning, including how the homepage and other looks. Is there a future role probability for just like a chief product officer, like chief positioning officer, or a chief product marketing officer kind of thing? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, especially that's a great question. And like we've seen a lot of people talk about that. Is there going to be a chief product marketing officer or chief positioning officer? And I'm not sure that there will be, mainly because as you get larger, the positioning kind of calcifies. And so there's not that many big shifts. So like we just saw with, and I'm totally blanking on the brand, they're in the e-commerce space. It'll come to me a little bit later. I'll come back to if I can think of the name. But they basically, Klaviyo, sorry, it just came back to me. Klaviyo, very big, successful company, pretty sure they're publicly traded. They had been doing effectively email marketing. That was like the positioning. Like we're an email marketing software for, you know, D2C and stuff like that. They recently did a big repositioning where now they call themselves the main or first or best, I can't remember, CRM for B2C companies, which is interesting because when you think of Salesforce, you're like, well, they're the CRM for B2B. Who's the CRM for B2C? And Klaviyo's like, that's us. So that was probably, I'm guessing, was very thought through and planned and strategized for a really long time. And then it was executed and rolled out. But that was probably the first big shift in many years. Or like Shopify, Spotify. If you take Spotify was just music. And then they added on podcasts and audiobooks. And now they're like, we're the one platform for listening in general. Bigger, expanded positioning, stuff like that. And that was after at least 10 years. They didn't add podcasts, I think, for the first 10 years until they were the #1 market leader in music when they IPO'd. Then they added podcasts, and then it was multiple years, and then they were the market leader in podcasts. and then they added on audiobooks. And it's a question, will they become the market leader there? I'm not so sure. But either way, to me, it's a question of, does there deserve to be an executive level role for something that really might only happen once every 10
Once
years?
in every 10 years. So I think I got the answer for that. That's a very
Yeah.
case. Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
the product marketing stuff to support the positioning, I think that makes sense. I think the product marketing function really makes sense. But again, like I think the CMO and the chief product officer, I think their two combined roles really kind of cover your bases for the product in the market in broad terms of strategy for those long hauls where you're kind of living in one positioning, just trying to win that specific market before you have to deal with the big positioning shift.
Got it. And the next one, which I was also thinking through is like, I mean, we talk about broad this thing like misconceptions and other this thing and how you actually differentiate. One other thing which also gets talked about is like, do you just as you go into a more of a enterprise level positioning, do you talk about primarily, and there are two types where like you either talk about use case based positioning or a category based positioning, which is there. What are the kind of like practices around both this and like what kind of companies should adopt a category based positioning versus a use case based positioning? Any
Yeah.
listen,
Yeah.
advice around that?
For sure, for sure. And it's basically a question of maturity, right? It's for your target audience, how mature are they as buyers? So if I'm selling some new sexy category, I probably don't want to lead with that if the people in the group that I'm trying to sell to have no concept of what it is. I probably would more want to say, I've created software for these specific workflows in your life that will really, help your company in X, Y, and Z ways. Versus if I have a more mature buyer and that's my target audience, I probably need to immediately clarify what makes me different in a specific, let's say, category. So like if you take something like even cell phones, right? Or no, actually, I'll take another one. If you take something like credit cards, if I am selling credit cards to people in the United States, I need to do more of that like category-based positioning where I say, this is why you pick our credit card over the hundreds of other options out there. Incredibly mature market. They totally get it. They know the ins and outs. They can compare the point values. And so I need to come up with some sort of very differentiated way to stand out within an existing category. If I'm a company that sells credit cards, I could also say, we're actually going to go after people, let's say in like countries in Africa that would be considered unbanked countries. There are countries where nobody at the average level has a credit card. It's a whole populations of unbanked. For them, I need to convince them that a credit card is actually the best way for them to purchase and finance all these things. So it'll be more use case or solution oriented. It's less of saying, this is why our credit card over the other ones, because for that group that's very immature in relation to your software or your product, whatever it is, it's going to be much more of an immature use case based message. So it all depends on who your target audience is and their level of understanding related to the category.
It's like actually, firstly, amazing example, and I guess you just pull it out of the blue in terms of like how to explain like a very mature category like credit card, which we kind of take it as default in a market like US, and how it will be positioned in US versus how it will be positioned in a totally unbanked country or a continent or something like that was pretty amazing. And I could relate to this as well, and even within like companies which come from AI products or agents and other things. So to a traditional software industry, how you say like how your agents or other thing is better compared to if you're selling to a manufacturing or other thing where you have to specifically give a use case or how it is. And this makes a lot of sense, which is there.
There's also another aspect of along those same lines. There's another aspect too of like the technology adoption curve where you see those like innovators and early adopters on the far early side of a technology. And then when you get to the mainstream, when you're trying to bring it to the mainstream, those early adopters will often not care as much about having highly defined use cases. They'll be like, give me the technology and we'll figure out the best way to use it to get a competitive edge. And so they want to get these agents, they want to get, they're reading about MCP and like all the stuff in the AI world. They're deep in there and they're just trying to get their hands on the tech so they can figure out what's the best way to deploy it. But the rest of the world, the mainstream, is actually waiting on the sidelines looking for solidified use cases that have been proven to really make a difference. And we've used the analogy of Lego blocks.
Yeah.
That like if you're early adopters, they want to buy a box of just all the different types of Lego blocks, and they're going to figure out what to build. And then the rest of the people are like, I want to build the Eiffel Tower. I want to have set directions of exactly how to build the Eiffel Tower. I want to know that tons of other people have built this same Lego Eiffel Tower before, that it's not going to be missing any of the pieces, that I can find support videos on YouTube in case I get stuck on my Eiffel Tower, that it's going to stand, it's going to be sturdy, it's tested, it's tried. And so that's also a big thing for these AI companies right now, is like moving from these early adopters, tinkerer types, into the mainstream. The mainstream is going to very quickly force them to define what the use cases are. And I think there's a guy named Tom Goodwin, I want to say his name is, really, really good follow on LinkedIn, talks a lot about digital transformation. And I think he recently posted that it was something like 95% of AI rollouts in these big enterprise companies have not produced like any meaningful value. And it's because they were so ambiguous and like, let's see what we can figure out. And no one really knows yet what are going to be the killer use cases of this. They have inklings that different things will work good and maybe are more important than others. But that's going to be the big challenge for most of these AI native companies, is how are they going to move from the tinkerers, the early adopters, into the rest of the enterprise to get these big companies to adopt them at scale.
That's great. One more question which I had, and this was something which we had been gathering from some of the singers, like this is more of a relationship-based question, which is like, you have the product marketing team and they think about like, this is the positioning. They do the whole research around the whole market and around saying like, okay, these are the key things which our product stands for. These are the key features which people first immediately resonates and then they want to build. And then there's of course the sales team. And with number of AEs and with the CRO or the sales leaders which come in, and also with multiple products they sell to, there is always a kind of like, is my homepage and my web page talking about the product which I'm selling, or talking about the things which I want to sell? Oh, I saw this doesn't even make sense. Some competitors doing it, that's a usual reference. But it's more importantly, like, I am talking to a customer about it, but our homepage or web page, the landing page doesn't even talk about this. So you're not giving me enough support, kind of a question. How do you see product marketing or even the positioning people actually handle these kind of questions, and how do they convince and align sales with product marketing?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, very relational, and it's how much trust is there within the org, and how closely aligned is the product marketing organization with the people on the front lines doing the selling. So there's a company called Colab, and they do a really, really good job of integrating product marketing throughout all of the organization. MJ, their CMO, she's amazing. Really good follow on LinkedIn if you're not following her. But she basically talks about like, it's so highly integrated that they're building these battle cards for sales teams. They're sharing very specific things, and it's like a two-way street. Like all of it's always impacting each other, and really like it's a very tightly wound thing. Most companies are not like that. Most companies, we worked with a very large publicly traded enterprise company, and the product marketing team didn't even have access to the product. And they were supposed to be the product marketing team. They had no login, nothing. So, you see breakdowns like that, and you're like, I wonder if the output of the product marketers is going to be helpful to the sales team. And it's like, probably not, right? Because there's just a giant chasm. So I think it really is like bringing these things in together to making sure that they are very, very tightly aligned. And I think product marketing does their best work when they own very specific assets. And honestly, I think that sales enablement sometimes is good for product marketing to own, but sometimes it's not. I actually think product marketing makes more sense sitting under the marketing org, not under like its own separate kind of free-floating entity that's very cross-functional. I think that's a less valuable way to use product marketing. In my opinion, I would say product marketing should report up into marketing and basically be the voice of the product to all the different parts of the marketing org. Because marketing, I mean, they're balancing brand marketing, which is a very different type of activities that don't often involve the product at all, right? Like sponsoring an event or having a booth at a trade show, or running a Super Bowl ad, or buying a stadium and putting your name on it. Like those things don't necessarily talk about the product at all. But the goal of product marketing is to sort of advocate and make sure that we're actually marketing the product as well. And people out there are getting excited about the prospect of using the product for the specific functionality that's going to make their lives so much easier. And, you know, I think in our little corner of LinkedIn, we see a lot of marketing that is really good at the brand marketing side. Like there's so many companies that I could tell you about their ethos and what they stand for and their vibe, and I couldn't list a single functionality of what the company does because it never gets promoted, right? And I'm like, I see they're doing funny videos and they're hosting cool events and they have a nice podcast where they interview industry leaders. So there's a lot of brand affinity. But if someone said, what does that company's product actually do? When would you use it? I draw a blank on it.
Oh, it's happened a lot of time. It's like, yeah, I know the brand, but I don't know what they do. So there is no way where like when I have a pain, I'll actually reach out to them. I'll just be like, oh, they are cool guys. I'll search on YouTube and get their podcasts or even see their ad copies or something. But when I have that pain, I'm not going to reach out to them. And that's actually a kind of a marketing failure itself in the whole thing. And you actually also touched upon an interesting point. Product marketing reports into marketing or to product?
Yeah, I think for most companies, especially companies that have a higher ACV that aren't in the product-led space, I do think PMM should report to marketing, not product. I think it's a slightly different game when you're doing a primary PLG approach. I think it probably fits better in marketing because you want them involved in all those conversations about onboarding, what happens in the product, like activation throughout all the way to, you know, monetization and retention and things like that. To me, that fits better in those cases. But I think any company that's doing primarily traditional sales and marketing to grow the business, I think it makes more sense for it to go under marketing.
Got it. That's the thing. One last question. A lot of questions come around early stage startups, but generally there is a less clutter, more easier way to understand positioning and category, use case, etc., and comes out very well. But as companies grow bigger, let's say more than $10 million, $15 million, they expand their products. There'll be a landing product which will be low ACV, but there is an expansion product or there is a higher product which is much higher ACV. And company has grown in the last 3 years. So they were at $3 million 1.5 years back. Now they're currently like $10 or $12 million. And suddenly they are wondering like, okay, of course I have to go up market, but what do I land with? What kind of this thing? I have grown with this kind of a certain kind of a pitch and these features and these functionalities, but my product has expanded. Even the use cases and what it actually solves for has expanded. So it's a kind of a constant struggle. The founder is not sure about whether to do it or not. Sales team is pushing on the other side to say, like, this is what we need to talk about. Marketing also, if let's say the new CMO, that's when they hire the first CMO. Earlier, they used to have like a couple of people reporting under the founder, and that's when the confusion starts. So any kind of, since you have worked with so many companies, you would have seen some of these situations play out. So how do you think through it?
Yeah, and actually, I'll share my screen really quick. We have a very, we have a diagram that is helpful for this. It's basically like, what do you do once you start having a bunch of products, a bunch of use cases that you could support? How do you go about positioning the company at that point, right? And so this is sort of like a simple framework that we have seen kind of across the board. Can it be helpful? And I think, yeah, perfect. So if you think of it, it's on a spectrum. At the far left side, you have the goal is to summarize the value across all the use cases. To basically say, okay, if I'm Sage and I have 33 products for many audiences, what can I do on the homepage? I'm going to try to summarize the value across all of them. So even though there's 33 products, at the end of the day, we're helping people make faster and smarter decisions, right? We're helping them get insights, take action. You're summarizing across the value. Now, the problem is, if you don't know what Sage does, very unclear, right?
Very unclear.
It's like, this doesn't really help me. It sounds cool, and I'm sure it sounded cool in the boardroom when it was presented. But again, the summarized approach is probably, the more large you get, the more products you have, this is probably the least clear option. The second option, which was done by Rippling for a while, they recently actually pivoted to the summarized one. I bet they hired a new executive, and that's probably why. But the middle one is the itemized approach. So more messaging clarity here than the summarized approach. You basically don't try to position across all of them. You effectively say, we've got a big set of stuff we do, and the positioning will happen on the sub pages. It's not going to really happen at the homepage level. The homepage may have some level of like brand positioning, you could say, But really, the whole idea is to drive people to the specific product that matters to them. So this was for a while the second scroll on Rippling's page. And the first scroll was something like simplify HR, IT, and finance. So they're just like saying, we do stuff for HR, IT, and finance. You scroll down and it says explore by product. And they immediately drive you to these sub doors to try to get you to see, are you here for corporate cards? Are you here for device management? Are you here for payroll? And you would go and click the one. Now, this makes sense for some companies that actually get revenue in sort of equal measure from these different aspects. So from what I understand about Rippling, how they build products is they'll have these little teams go and spin up an MVP, find some semblance of product market fit, and then get added to the suite. So it's very possible that people would have been coming to Rippling for any number one of these things. So if their revenue is kind of evenly distributed, it's like we don't necessarily want to pick one over the others because it's likely that people are coming for any number of them. That's not true for most companies. Most companies have a most valuable product, a most valuable segment that is far and away the big revenue driver. And so the last idea is prioritize. And I know I've used this slide a couple times, but someone like Salesforce is saying, we want you to start with the starter suite for free, right? The free starter suite, it's an all-in-one CRM. Before we go to the other 27 products for all these different audiences, we think this should start. And when you scroll down, you start to see the other things they do, but they primarily lead with this. And other companies like Apple, they do the same deal where they will basically prioritize whatever the big launch was for that year. So like, or not that year, that month. And so like when you're in the fall, the main priority of Apple is to sell iPhones. So when you go on apple.com, what's on the beginning? It's not, here's every single product that we do. It's not some sort of summary of all the products like Creativity Unleashed, Apple or something. It's literally, here's the most important product right now, and it's the iPhone. Then in the morning, you know, I would say the next part of the year, maybe it's the iPad. Then they'll switch it to, so they're always prioritizing using the homepage for that specific thing.
That's great. So we're almost the last 5 minutes or 4 minutes, and we thought like we'll just take some questions. One of them is from Fahad. He's actually putting it back to you. So like, hey Anthony,
Yeah.
how do you think Fletch is going up market? So would you like to take that?
Yeah, great question. So we have always gotten upmarket companies to work with us. They've never been our primary ICP. And for a long time, we explicitly said early stage was our focus because we wanted to get as many reps as we could to make our framework better, right? We treat the framework like it's an LLM. The more companies that we can run through it, the more robust it's going to get. So that was why we stayed with them. But now that we have the framework much more solidified, we can take more large clients. And so we actually are opening up the positioning a little bit. And we say we serve B2B software companies or B2B SaaS companies and don't explicitly specify early stage. And we've added a couple different pricing tiers for different sizes to try to sort of match the different demand that might be coming through.
That's great. I think it's more challenges as well, and that's going to be far more kind of interesting as we grow. And this is one last thing. It was more like a post of love from Archie. Love Anthony and his insights helped me a lot in the past. So it's like someone showing love. I just wanted to showcase. And I guess we are almost the close of the thing. So Anthony, thanks a lot for the insights. I guess there were also a lot more questions from my side as well. So sorry for the thing, but in a sense, it both as a founder and I think it should have also would have applied to our audience as well. It's like to understand more the misconceptions and the mistakes or pitfalls where people can go in so that you are able to guide people in a sense, like beyond that to say like, okay, these are the things which you need to see if you're looking at going to upmarket. Avoid these pitfalls. It opens up thinking and then it actually has a lot more, then it makes clarity. If you know what to avoid, then it's actually most part of the things become clear for you. So thanks a lot for delivering that. This was a great session. And Anthony, if you can just would share your final closing thoughts and most importantly, how do people reach out to you or connect with you in this thing? That would be great.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for having me. Super fun discussion. Love this topic. And yeah, I think if any of you are listening and we're not already connected on LinkedIn, shoot me a connect request. I would happy to chat with any of you, just even at a friend's level. And then if you're interested in our services, right, our website's fletchpmm.com. And this is a good test. how clearly are we positioned on our own website? Can you read us and figure out what we do and all the how stuff, right? Or not. So that would be a fun thing for you to try.
That would be great. And it's also, I think this would also lead to a lot of people actually looking at Factor's website and saying like, okay, well, how we are positioned and how they are able to read it. And I think we'll also be able to get good feedback out. So we are also crowdsourcing feedback, and we are going through a website revamp over the next couple of months. So that should also be very interesting. So thanks a lot, everyone, for being here. And thanks a lot, Anthony, for taking your time and being part of this event. And we are just closed at 1 hour. I'll just
Awesome.
end stream.
All right, and